Channel 5 Network. This is MorningLine.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. I am Nick Barris on this Wednesday. We've got a good show on tap for you. As always, MorningLine, if you're a regular viewer, you already know this. If you're just joining us, it's about you, the calls, the conversation, the give and take that we have during these programs between you, me, and our guests. And this morning, it's one of these guests that provide a service that I think at one time or another all of us may need, and some of you may need right now. We're talking about legal representation, legal advice, questions about the law, and along those lines. And so ask an attorney today. Your chance to ask some legal questions. We can stay broad, but our attorney, like many of them, have specialties. They have, our guest has a good background in general, but has specialties, and I'm going to let him tell you all about that. And you know him because he's a regular on this show. Andy Allman, good morning to you, sir.
Hey, how are you?
Nice to have you on.
Thanks.
We were just talking before the show about, sometimes I call, we interact, and we'll touch bases on things, and he is so busy. You really keep busy because you spend a lot of time in federal court.
Mm-hmm, that's correct.
And it's not all, because it's in federal court, just here in Tennessee or in Nashville. You can go around into other states even.
That's correct. In fact, I'm about to head to Boston for a while.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Tell folks then, again, why. And federal court has specifically certain types of cases often. What your specialty is. So just to remind folks.
At my office, we do employment law.
Yeah.
We represent employees who feel like they've been wrongfully terminated. They've been treated in a discriminatory fashion in the workplace, maybe because of their age, disability, serious medical condition. Mm-hmm. Maybe they've had to exercise some leave under the Family Medical Leave Act. Individuals who feel like maybe they've been punished or penalized or even terminated because they've had a workers' compensation injury.
Yeah.
And they filed a workers' compensation claim. Represent a great number of employees who've engaged in whistleblower activity, and they've either refused to participate in illegal or unethical behavior that the company wants them to participate in, or they've reported the company to some type of regulatory agency for that type of work. And then a lot of cases where employees feel like they've been sexually harassed in the workplace and then retaliated against, been subjected to a hostile environment, the subject of racial discrimination, religious discrimination, national origin discrimination, discrimination based on sexual orientation.
The definitions of some of what you just described, if you would, what is a good client that is suing for whistleblowing? What would define a whistleblower? You touched on it a bit, but that means you're someone working within an agency, organization, or business that sees something being done, not necessarily to you, where you feel like, I didn't like being yelled at, I'm going to complain about that. It's more you're seeing something that can damage the public, the consumer or something, and say, I think we're doing this wrong, we need to fix it, and because you point that out to them, they fire you.
That's correct. And in fact, a few months ago, there was a story that was all over the news nationwide, and there were two employees that worked for a nuclear facility, I believe in the state of Washington.
That's right.
And they had begun sending...
Hanford.
They had begun sending internal memorandums within the company that there were significant safety violations that could endanger the public at large. And the company refused to act on it. They took it one step further and shared their complaints and their reports of these violations with regulatory agencies, and they got fired for it. That's the type of whistleblower case or analysis you're kind of looking for when someone comes to you with that type of claim. What is it that you saw or that you refused to participate in, and then who did you tell?
Okay.
And then once you establish the violations or the safety concerns and the reporting of it, was there an adverse employment action taken against you? Were you demoted, fired, suspended, changed from day shift to midnight shift?
Yeah.
Had your overtime taken away, things along those lines.
And really the key too is then, so that there's proof, having the emails or the evidence that you did indeed pass this on to your supervisors, that they knew about it and for whatever reason said, you know what, we're not going to make this change, we're just going to punish this guy.
That's correct.
Some type of proof of that.
Well, and if there's one thing I can really stress to employees out there, document this stuff.
Save it.
Document this stuff. Email has really shown to be one of the most significant forms of evidence to corroborate what your claim is. And so, a lot of times a potential client will come to me and they'll say, well, I met with my supervisor and told my supervisor A and B, or I met with the head of human resources and told them A and B, and unfortunately, when we start getting into the process, that supervisor or whatever individual my client says they had a verbal communication with, that person says, well, that never took place.
Yeah. Or he's remembering it differently than I remember it.
Exactly.
And so he said, she said, so you got to save those documents or whatever to prove it.
And what's important
Paper
for
trail.
an employee also is that if you find yourself in a verbal communication, if you will, that's initiated by the supervisor or somebody else, follow up with an email. Send that individual an email that says, look, I just want to memorialize our meeting today to be sure that I understood everything that was said. Here's what I understand that was talked about, that was said. If I've misunderstood something, please respond to my email and let me know. And that way you've at least memorialized that verbal communication.
Why is it typically these cases end up in federal court?
Because an employee has claims both under federal law and state law.
Like civil rights violations?
Exactly.
Okay.
Someone who's been subjected to gender discrimination,
Gotcha.
and maybe a female in the workplace.
All right.
When she brings that action, she's got a claim under the Tennessee Human Rights Act and a claim under Title VII. And so you bring those cases in federal court because the federal courts can hear both of the claims, the federal and the state claim. If you only bring that claim in state court, a state court cannot hear the federal claims.
I've got you. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, listen, gosh, you cover a lot of ground. I think the field that you're in is fascinating. And think of how important whistleblowers are and to be protected.
Sure.
Because, I mean, you can go back through history and look at the role whistleblowers have played in getting information out there that made everyone's life better.
Yeah.
So I think it's crucial stuff. So he laid that out for you. But, of course, Andy has a general law background as well. So not to overly limit ourselves. If you have questions in that realm, hey, he's your man for sure. But if you have some more general, just legal questions, I think he's always willing to tackle them, and then we can take those as well. So the number 737-7587 is the number. You know, we already got calls. I mean, I got questions, but I'm going to let them go to you. So let's, before we take our first break, squeeze one or two, and we'll go to Liz. Hi, Liz. Good morning, Liz. Hello, Liz. Maybe she thought we were going to a break. We'll come back to Liz. Let's go to Robbie. Hi, Robbie.
Hello.
Hey.
Good morning.
Good morning. What's on your mind?
I saw on TV the other night about cemetery and people having the right to go. There was a fence and the owner wouldn't let them in. We have a similar situation. There's no fence. We wanted to know if we have to get permission from the owner. The cemetery sits about maybe 60, 70 feet off the road. And it's a very old cemetery. The first people come over in 1818, and I think maybe the last person buried was in the 30s or 20s.
And what's the interest? So this is a privately owned cemetery, and you want to be able to go and explore on the cemetery?
It's on the private land.
It's on private land. Why do you want to go there?
Well, we just want its ancestors.
Oh, so your ancestors are buried on this private land.
Ancestors is.
And
we want to know if we have the right to go onto the cemetery, and also we want to know if the cemetery could be bulldozed or anything. It's a very old cemetery, but...
Yeah, and let me ask you this, but the owner has already denied you access?
We haven't asked the owner. We want to know if we had to get permission from the owner just to walk across
Oh, okay, yeah.
place of the road, but we didn't know if we had to... Every time we wanted to go, do we have to get permission? And we also want to make sure that it wouldn't be... If he wanted to bulldoze you down and smooth it over... What's the rights we have?
Very interesting. Now that, again, that would come under the category of a very general question. I'm not even sure it's a legal question per se. It goes to trespass issues, but if her loved ones passed, look, if that's me, you know what I'm doing? I'm just walking out there. You're not going out to damage anything. You're not touching anything. If there's not a no trespassing sign posted and it's a cemetery, I'm walking out there. And then if he wants to come out, I'll apologize later, but that's me. You probably want to ask first?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, come on.
I saw that story on the news. I think it was yesterday. It was actually on the news. Notwithstanding what Nick says that he's going to do.
Yeah, don't always do what I do.
Think, and I don't do real property law, but I think what I heard on the news was that the individual, the cemetery is landlocked by this individual's property, and he has the right to prohibit people from coming onto his property.
Yeah.
Some initial thoughts I had were, well, number one, why wasn't there an easement created from the roadway to the cemetery? And I would think an organization that handles a lot of these issues would be the Historical Society. There is a Historical Society chapter in Nashville, and I think they deal with, when we talk about cemeteries or buildings that are this old that have historical significance, I would be fairly certain they've run across this issue before.
Yeah, and so maybe, she's talking about a different place than the one you saw on the news, and so
correct.
Maybe the best bet, though I can't imagine in a circumstance like that, certainly if that was my plot and a family like you came along and asked, we want to visit the grave of one of our ancestors, have at it. But I mean, yeah, so go ahead and ask. As far as moving the graves, I know there's certain guidelines and rules. We know in the past sometimes where there have been construction where there have been Indian burial sites, Native American sites at some locations. They have to be treated with respect. You go through a certain procedure to properly remove the remains and get with the ancestors and the families to move them to another location in that case. Moving any type of grave is a serious issue, and there are hoops they have to jump through. And I can tell you this, if you're very upset about the way it's done and they start just digging up graves, you call the media. We'll be out there with a camera to shoot it, and that'll put a stop to it real fast, because I don't know anyone who thinks that's a good idea without going through the proper steps.
Right.
All right. Hey, we have to take a break on that note, and his advice is good. Don't always follow mine. But that's just me. We'll take a break. We'll be back with more of your calls right after this.